Hi. Um, I'd like to briefly address today the fallacy that Patriarch Huyck uh, imagined Lebanon or lobbied the French for a Lebanon as a refuge for Christians. This is, by the way, part of a book in progress that I'm currently working on and that I'm hoping to send to the publisher this coming fall. The fruit of many years of living in this particular archive, the archive of the French Foreign Ministry, and recently beginning work with the Charles de Gaulle papers relative to Lebanon, papers on Lebanon of the Charles de Gaulle archive at the Archives Nationales in Paris. Anyway, my reading of the Times may be flawed. I'm still working on this, but I'm discovering from what the written record is revealing, I'm discovering that this notion that Hayek wanted a Greater Lebanon as a refuge for Near Eastern Christians may be over exaggerated, if not false, or at least apocryphal. So basically, it is written now, reflecting on past events. Um, so, um, but, suggesting that thinking of Lebanon as a refuge for Near Eastern Christians, that he had done that um, uh, in the 1920s is a later or latter day development in the process of his political development. So that's not how he proceeded from the beginning. And I want to stress the fact that he wanted Greater Lebanon at all costs. So there was no political vision. There was just a emotions. That's what was driving him, was emotion. It was not a coherent political vision. Um, so in other words, at least politically speaking, uh, the the idea was not emanating from a political philosophy or a political program. Emotively, it may have been correct. Yes, many Maronites of the patriarch's generation assumed, as a matter of history informed by emotion, they assumed that Lebanon was or was to be, but at least was a Maronite idea and a Maronite homeland. But this was again instigated by emotion, if not hubris, not political realism, nor even a coherent political program. And that the patriarch truly believed that Greater Lebanon would be a refuge for Christians, but he paid no heed to the large demographic proportions of non-Christians he was inviting or bringing into this new polity. More importantly, he paid no heed to the large proportions of Christians who were insensitive to his idea of Lebanon, this Lebanon as a refuge for Christians. The patriarch at the time assumed, like most Maronites of his generation, that Lebanon was by definition, by vocation, by avocation, and by its history as he understood it, which was essentially the history of the Maronites, written by Maronites, and by his own understanding of the notion of Lebanon, he assumed Greater Lebanon was, a matter of fact, a Maronite nation. Um, See, for instance, the text of his address at the peace conference at Versailles in 1919. You could also read through the writings of Maronite intellectuals of the time, namely Boudou Saint-James and his doorstopper of a book, La Question du Liban. Um, the French, all the while, were pushing for a smaller Lebanon, for a Petit Liban, which was also the project of a group of Maronites under the leadership of Émile Edé, So they were working for a smaller Lebanon, or absent a smaller Lebanon, then um, a uh, unitary Lebanon, not a unitary Lebanon, a confederate Lebanon. So the patriarch and his group were the ones who were pushing for a greater Lebanon um, as a state dominated by the Maronites, not a national home for the Christians. And I want to stress that Greater Lebanon was established at the insistence of Hawaiic and against the will of the French, not with the accord of the French. I mean, the archives are littered with documentations attesting to that. You can check the work of Mayor Zamir, who is the doyen of modern Lebanese history. From my perspective, Kamal Salibi lost that title. Have a look at Mayor Zamir's The Formation of Modern Lebanon, and it confirms what I'm saying. Zamir was the first historian of Lebanon to decorticate that particular archive relevant to this time period, the French Foreign Ministry and the British Foreign Office, and I highly, highly recommend reading The Formation of Modern Lebanon. But Zamir wrote in the 1980s, and other sources have since become available, and they paint the same devastating picture of the myopic Lebanese leaders of the 1920s and their political immaturity. The only adult in the room, by the way, during that time period was Emile Idde, who is almost erased today from Lebanese history, or otherwise he's dismissed as a Francophile and a Francophone who couldn't even speak Arabic, as if speaking Arabic was a litmus test of something or anything. He's painted today as a French agent or an executor of France's will. The reality, however, points to the fact that France had no executor of its will in Lebanon, and actually France itself acted as the executor of Patriarch Hawaiic's will. Sparkling evidence of that is that France made sure that its first 3 high commissioners to Lebanon were handpicked from among the most devoutedly Catholic generals and Catholic graduates of the prestigious Saint-Cyr Military Academy. Those were chronologically Henri Gouraud, the first one, Maxime Végan, the second one, and Henri Sarail, the third one. And all three almost at the beck and call of Patriarch Hawaiic. In fact, I do have a revelatory snippet of a dispute between Hawaiic and Gouraud, who in 1921, during a visit to Dimane, so this is almost a year and a few weeks after September 1st, 1920, Gouraud was during that visit suggesting a federative system for Lebanon, and the patriarch would blow in his face, raining almost insults on the venerable general, who, let's not forget, gave Hawaiic an inestimable gift a year before, September 1st, 1920. But first, some context to Gouraud's dabbling with the notion of a federative system for Lebanon, even for Syria also. In a telegram sent by Robert Dequet, who was Gouraud's secretary at the time, sent it to the Quai d'Orsay on November 23rd, 1920. So this is barely 3 months after the establishment of Greater Lebanon. Here's what Dequet writes. So, I mean, they were realizing that we brought into Greater Lebanon a bunch of people who wanted nothing to do with this. And the patriarch sort of dug in his heels. He said, no, this is what I want. We're keeping this come what may. So a portion of that telegram reads by Duque, again, November 23rd, 1920, quote, the entire Middle East, this is my translation, the entire Middle East, he writes actually l'Orient, not the Middle East, the Orient. So, but my translation, the entire Middle East has been so poorly packed together by the British, the resulting clutter is all the more legitimate reason for us, Frenchmen, to try to steer the minds clear of unitary political systems and instead advance federalist concepts. This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Third Republic talking. So the Third Republic, France's Third Republic, very rapidly centralized, but they had political maturity to think in terms, and I'll come to a couple more snippets that justify this, and they're very revelatory of our present times. What is going on today in Lebanon and in Syria, incidentally? So the entire Orient, the entire Middle East, has been so poorly packed together by the British. The resulting clutter is all the more legitimate reason for us Frenchmen to try to steer the minds clear of unitary political systems and instead advance federalist concepts. Federalism would be a great relief for much of the notables of these lands and a boon to the bulk of this region's population who remain to a very large extent alien to all kinds of unitary political life. End of quote. This amounts in a way to the position the French were taking at the time, a position paper, if you want to call it that, the position of the French relative to the political system that Lebanon and Syria ought to have adopted or ought to adopt in the future if they wanted to remain in their current configuration, in the case of Lebanon, as Greater Lebanon. Now, Hwayik, like most of the Maronites today, seemed to have a phobia toward the word federal. And this is revealed in a meeting on Friday, September 23rd, 1921, in Dimane, where Gouraud was the weekend guest of the patriarch, and Hwayik literally insulted him for daring suggest a federative system for Lebanon and accused him of attempting to divide Lebanon or melt it into a greater Syrian federation, an accusation to which Gouraud responds in the following, and I'll quote, surprise, surprise, Your Excellency, I am stunned to hear those words emanating from your eminence. How is it that Lebanon risks losing its independence in your telling? Are you sure such accusations pointed at me are appropriate? Is it me you are talking to here? Me, the guy who made my saloon for you? Me, whose soldiers put their lives on the line to spawn the Lebanon you wanted? Because, Your Excellency, it was indeed my soldiers, is it not, who brought about Lebanon's independence? End of quote. Now, I'll spare you other details of the meeting, but you can hopefully read them in the book when it comes out. But this should give you an idea of the ongoing tensions. But Gouraud still had hope for Lebanon, was in a way attached to Lebanon. Asked in an interview by Le Petit Parisien in 1922, I think it was in the summer of 1922, asked if whether or not he believed Lebanon or Syria, for that matter, were viable in the way they were put together, or if Lebanon in particular, if it had a future as a unitary state. Gouraud would answer, and this is a longish quote, so please bear with it, but I think it's a very, very important reflection on Lebanon from more than 100 years ago. And this is what he says. He says, yes, he believes that Lebanon is viable, has viability, but, okay, so this phobia of federalism. So he says, yes, I do believe in the future of this country, but let me repeat, Let us give it time. Its economic and political development, so viciously hampered by centuries of oppression, is still brittle. Its elites, so intellectually distinguished, still lack the necessary political wherewithal and experience. Its peasantry, it's admirable. It is also more often than not still unsophisticated. Its political dissensions are still, at the present time, so acute that listen to this. Its political dissensions at this time, we're talking, this is 1922. Its political dissensions are still, at the present time, so acute that a unitary Lebanon, even in the opinion of those qualified to voice their opinions on the matter, in the very diverse regions that are grouped under this name, a unitary Lebanon, for the time being, is almost inconceivable. This country still has to go through a period of learning, a period of education before it reaches the requisite maturity. It needs friendly tutelage. I think that the French mandate is qualified to ensure, in stages, the gradual formation of what should, for all intents and purposes, be a federal state. I think, let me repeat, I think you can take note of this. Uh, I, I think that the French mandate is qualified to ensure, in stages, the gradual formation of what should, for all intents and purposes, be a federal state, which will be one of the most solid guarantees of the balance of the Orient. You may say that we have here before us a very heavy, a very arduous task, often yielding disappointing outcomes. Yes, an arduous task, but a magnificent one as well, reestablishing peace in this Orient, a peace which, however far back into history one wishes to go, a peace that this region has seldom been granted. Our arduous task is to bring harmony to the disparate parts of this country, a French style harmony in a traditionally divided region, strewn as it is with the stunning remnants of millennial civilizations. Tell me, do you know a country more beautiful than this? Tell me, is there a task that would be more noble than this? On and on. I'm going to skip through. You're going to travel through this country. You're going to meet admirable people. You're going to meet admirable French officers and civil servants working hard in putting into execution France's work, etc. Blah blah blah. But um, there are possibilities for this country. Possibilities that can only come to fruition with a federal system, to a country. So you will discern the possibilities, this country's possibilities for the future. Uh, Again, he mentions a federal system, a country that, this is how he concludes it, the country with undeniable sympathies for our own, with remarkable fervor for our culture. We shall never relinquish nor bargain on our dedication to its rebirth. And so there you have it. Here we are today, and we remain as adept today as we were 100 years ago, as adept at squandering the foreigner's gift.